Hey, I pushed all the buttons and we're live precisely at 9 p.m. Those of you who are tuning into the YouTube, Facebook live streams. And I had a question come up. And since this is a question show, we're going to throw it right out there. You can comment on either Facebook or YouTube. And in theory, we should be able to see your comment. Doesn't matter what platform you're on. We should be able to see your comment and answer your comment if it's worthy of an answer. So we got the Detroit man on the other side here, the big D, Derek, who's hanging out in Detroit, Michigan this weekend playing with cars. Is that right?
I sure was, John. How you doing this week?
Oh, busy, but hey, we're here. It's Thursday night, podcasting, answering your questions about cars. Start popping them into the chat. I've got some lists that I've taken off of some of the social media, some of the emails, some of the past show comments that people have asked questions and we kind of overlooked. But yeah, I'm hanging in here trying to get the podcast moving. Listeners are increasing every week, so you guys are sharing the show. I think that's Derek's tagline.
That is, you're helping us grow. You're sharing the show.
What were your activities this week? You actually did car stuff that people would care about.
I know, actually, the last few weeks I've been doing car stuff again, John. It's that time of year, the spring, early summer season, and here we are traveling around and hitting car shows. Cincinnati Concours, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, and this past weekend. Went up to Dearborn, Michigan, to what I like to call my alma mater, the Henry Ford, and hung out in Greenfield Village for the weekend at the Motor Muster. So every Father's Day weekend inside Greenfield Village is the show known as Motor Muster for cars from 1933 to 1976. And they have to, of course, much like Old Car Festival I talk about so much, the rules behind Old Motor Muster are the same. They have to be as they would have come from factory or have accessories from the period on them. You can't have anything that is modern accessories on the vehicles. Hot rods are not allowed, street rods are not allowed, and however, some interesting race cars are always there from the period. And this year, actually, a really cool drag racing bike from the Michigan area was there. So, had a good time. Narrated the race cars Saturday evening, and on Sunday, I narrated cars of the 1960s and 70s alongside Matt Anderson, curator of transportation at the Henry Ford, and our good friend Andy Beckman, who is the archivist at the Studebaker National Museum. So, a couple hours of fun talking about cars and goofing off with two other historians.
Yeah, that always sounds like an adventure. I saw some of your private social media posts, and a couple of the vehicles looked interesting. Did you have a favorite? What stuck out if you were judging? What was best of show?
Ooh, wow. Well, yeah, I don't judge anymore there, just with time constraints on a few things.
Well,
So
we
when I
know that.
was
We just want you to judge now.
Yeah, I know. When I was judging, I would always judge the curator's choice, which is the best unrestored vehicle in the bunch. And I didn't look around enough to really know which vehicles were altogether the unrestored vehicles. But if I had to pick one that would be more of a best of show, which I guess could be either restored or unrestored. Um, Honestly, for a cool factor, the one picture you saw online that I put up of the custom van from the 1970s, that thing was pretty cool. I mean, it captured that 1970s custom van period in a way that I haven't seen a van at a show capture that uh, in a long time. So I think that was just from a cool factor and a thing you don't normally see at a show. Uh, I think that one would have gotten my vote while I was there.
I did like that van, but of course, I'm partial to vans, and vans are one of the best forms of transportation ever invented and created. And Jason, yes, we do have no driving gloves polos. These are a little bit harder to come by, but I have printed up some coffee cups that are available for order, both 8 and 12-ounce mugs. I do have these insulated. See, I've fixed my green screen so we can show this stuff. Insulated cup, which I put this together as an experiment, and man, this sucker works. I put ice in it this morning at the hotel, and I still have ice from the hotel in here. And keep in mind, it's sat in the car for 9 hours today, half the time in air conditioning and half the time in just direct sunlight. So if you're interested, shoot me an email. I'll give you a choice of what we got, and we can probably set you up or anybody else who wants a mug and I even have a couple different styles. I have the white behind the blue. I have blue text. So we'll worry about that later. They'll get on the website here shortly. I'm doing some website work, but we are going through with that. So that kind of answers the first question, is how to get a no driving gloves mug. Or no driving gloves swag.
We need to pitch them. Have a good marketing plan behind that. Something like no driving glove mugs. They're better looking than the two mugs that host the show. Something.
Oh, that's definitely not true. Better looking than one of the mugs that hosts the show.
Hey, I'll admit it. I'm not.
I guess I need to move it. Did that squeak through the microphone for everybody? I needed
Oh, it did.
So that the logo was presenting. Oh, so I don't know. I think I'm why we get the people start joining us in the chat room and start throwing some questions. I was going to hit some of the automotive news. We keep hitting the automotive news that's happened in the last week. And there's interesting things, and then there's really interesting things, and then there's some things that are no surprise. Where should we start? No surprises, interesting things, or
well, let's go with no surprise. Let's start out boring and go with no surprise.
Well, they say if you first you don't succeed, try again. And if you fail, quit. There's no sense in being an idiot about it. And I guess we're going to find out how Henry Fisker feels about those sayings, because his second one of his car companies declared bankruptcy this week. So if you happen to own a Fisker Ocean, I'm sorry. You would think this year there was probably no dumber EV investment than a Cybertruck. And I found the Ocean a gorgeous little SUV. I mean, it clicked all the right boxes, other than it had powertrain issues, which it was recalled for just days before the bankruptcy. It had software issues. It had mechanical issues. It just had issues. Just overextended. The company wasn't structured properly, and they declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is normally a reorganization. But in the statement, they said, we have about $500 million in liabilities, and we have about $500 million to $1 billion in assets, and we're done.
Which, John, I have to say, I agree with you. I think it's kind of a shame, because I've seen a couple of the Fisker Oceans on my commute into Nashville and out of Nashville, and it's a good looking vehicle. I actually saw it was the first time I saw it, didn't know what it was. So obviously sped up to try to figure out what it was, and was able to read that it was a Fisker Ocean. And then came home, pulled it up, and actually I showed it to my wife, and she actually thought it was a beautiful vehicle. Actually started looking at how much they cost and what it might take to get one. Obviously, glad now that we didn't make that decision because of the
Well, you can
problems we would
pick
likely be running into.
you could pick one up for pennies on the dollar right now.
That's true. We could, and I wonder if we could do an LS swap into that bad boy.
I'm pretty sure you could do anything. Maybe you
I
just
think you can LS
take
you
the
can
body
LS
off.
swap anything if you reach out to our former co-host, Will Posey. I think you can LS swap anything with him, can't you?
You might be able to. I was just thinking body swap. Just go ahead and take your Arcadia, cut the body off, drop that Fisker on there, and be good.
That might work actually. Take some measurements after the show.
No, but I feel sorry for Fisker because I mean, I liked the first car he did while it had some stupid things about it, like the exhaust exiting on the driver's side in front of the driver's door. There were some, little things like that were irritating. But I did talk to an Ocean owner, and they absolutely loved it. It was a couple chatted them with outside of a store, and they liked it. They knew Fisker's problems. This was a couple of months ago before the problems were glaring and bankruptcy was inevitable. Not sure how they feel about it now. There are some articles out there on how to acquire a Fisker if you want one, or how to what's that called? Deacquisitioning your Fisker from your collection if you need to run.
Deaccession that bad boy.
It's a sad thing to see, and being so electrical and software dependent, unfortunately. When Oldsmobile went out of business, you could buy an Oldsmobile and not have to worry too much. Because, number one, there's badge engineered cars, so you could steal other stuff from General Motors. But there's not much you can do. If the software is buggy, the software is always going to be buggy unless you can rewrite it yourself. That was sad to see. And why little bit of other EV news that just crossed my mind is, did you hear what Rivian's doing for the 2025 model year with their trucks? Both the R1T and the R1S?
I have not heard that.
They're doing some tweaking to the looks and some styling. But what the big thing that got me is they are pulling 1.2 miles of wire out of these vehicles. And by doing that, dropping their weight by like 150 pounds. And that still leaves wires in the car. Jeez. Like I said, with Fisker is that there's a lot of electrical stuff. I don't know if Rivian went to, fiber optics or what, how or if this was just all unnecessary wire. That's a lot of copper. So
just Bluetooth everything, John. Come on.
I tell that to my surround sound in the living room in between the TV and the speaker. Both same manufacturer, and they like to disconnect every now and then.
And if somebody would just get on the ball and get back to work on everything Nikola Tesla was working on, we could be broadcasting electricity. We wouldn't need wires. We could be broadcasting it.
Well, I think that's going to be around the corner. And if you get broadcasting electricity, you don't need charging stations for your electric vehicles anymore. They're just like perpetual motion machines as long as those diesel generators are operating.
Hey, we don't talk about how the electricity is made. We just talk about how we use it. Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Everything from the end user point back is magic. Okay. It's all just magic how it gets to what we're using.
Well, speaking of magic, uh, we had a conversation this week about connected vehicles and going, finding stuff that's not connected and over tech, etc. And I think maybe I touched on it on this show last week or the week before, but the new EU law that takes effect, I think July 1st, if not June 1st, about the speed warning alerts. Did I mention that on the show yet?
I don't believe you have, John.
Yeah. Well, the EU has mandated that all vehicles sold, if they exceed the speed limit by 10 miles per hour, I believe it is, they start chirping at you like a seatbelt alarm. Beep, 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 to let you know that you have exceeded the speed limit. I do believe these can be turned off, but from some of what I've read and heard, there are some cars that are making it to the US that have this feature already for some reason. And it's multiple menus. It's not just a simple button to turn it off, like, kind of your traction control and stuff used to be, but you've got to go multiple menus into those wonderful touchscreens we have. And if it's in the EU, it's going to work its way over here. And I believe California will be leading the charge as they have proposed legislation to take effect in 2032, making these speed alerts mandatory in all vehicles sold in California.
No, John, I can't believe that. I can't believe California would be the first in the country to do something like that.
Well, they're the innovators and pioneers for automotive technology.
Is that what we're calling it these days?
Yeah. And what gets me is, it's tied to your GPS that's built into your car. So that means now all cars will have GPS, whether or not, I guess, it shows up on the screen or not. You might have to pay to see it on your screen, but all cars are going to have GPS. So it's just another way to track you.
Yep.
They're saying this information. Well, no, it's
subscription they can make you pay for.
No,
if you want it
probably
turned on to use.
Yeah, for the navigation. I thought you meant for the speed alert. No, the law is going to dictate that speed alert's got to be on.
Yeah.
And where was I going with that? And I guess they've already tied it to the insurance companies, and the insurance companies are thinking this is great. And they're going to, they support it because where I even had statistic numbers, which seem really stupid. I got to open a new web page here. But if you comply and you stay within these speeds and that, obviously you could be eligible for an insurance discount. I don't know why they don't pitch it the other way and go, well, if you don't pay attention to this, you could be eligible for a insurance increase or an increase in your insurance. Oh, come on, let me save this article last night.
Well, I'm not sure where you're headed with it, John. I'll let you pull that article up, but and I think you mentioned that some vehicles in the US actually already have this as an option in them. You can actually set a speed warning indicator on your vehicle. If I remember right, actually, the Acadia, my wife's Acadia, has this option. I have it turned off. That there's a speed warning that if you go over the posted speed limit that it detects through the GPS unit, it will I think it beeps and flashes a little red light on the dash or something, like your crash avoidance light, I think, if I remember right, blinks on the Acadia. But I mean, this is so many. I think there's so many factors behind this that are issues. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of uh, there. I would hope there's going to be a lot of questioning behind this. There's going to be a lot of possible, court action, invasion of privacy, things like that, various laws that, you know, people will find, and likely the lawyers will find and go after manufacturers, or at least law enforcement, for trying, and insurance companies for trying to use this against private citizens in their vehicles. But that is all to be seen. So I
Yeah.
obviously I don't like it because I turned mine off, at least for the
Well,
warning aspect.
I can remember back decades. I mean, I had a friend that had an 85 Thunderbird in 85, 86, and it would do the same thing. It would alert you of the speeds, and you would tell it, 55 miles an hour. And of course, your GPS is like, if is it Waze when you're using it? If you exceed the posted speed limit, it changes to red or something for you.
Mhm.
But these systems, let's see here. They call them ISA systems, and these use GPSs, speed databases, and sometimes cameras to dynamically adapt to the actual speed limit. In other words, the cameras can read the signs, because I travel a certain section of road just off Interstate 22 if I'm heading to Jasper, that when you get on it, my Apple Maps and my Google Maps both say the speed limit's 15, but the speed limit's 55. So if I'm driving this area and I have one of these ISA systems, do I got to drive 15 or maybe 24 and be a nuisance so the thing's not beeping? Or can I drive the speed limit? If it's connected to GPS, I guess I've got to be a nuisance. If it's actually cameras that can see the signs and override the GPS, we're counting on a lot of municipalities to keep their stuff updated. But the surprising things out of this article, they say that most drivers are actually in favor of this. And this is how they get that headline. Always look behind the curtain. The survey revealed that more than 80% of drivers want a feature that displays the current speed limit, while 70% prefer a gentle tone to sound when the speed limit changes. That's not what this system's doing. It's not necessarily indicating the speed, and damn well it's not going to be a gentle tone.
Well, and it's not going to warn you when the speed limit changes either. It's only going to warn you that you've now exceeded the speed limit and you're going too fast. It's not going to give you the pre-warning that the speed limit has changed.
Right. And then, of course, like I said, they're talking about the insurance companies could offer lower premiums for drivers who don't speed. With the survey indicating 70% of drivers want this in their next car under those conditions. Of course, people that are frequent speeders are 20% less likely to want this system. It's just more nannying, more things we've got to pay for, more things, How about the police out there, they actually start enforcing some laws, issuing speeding tickets, issuing too slow, illegal lane changes. I talked last week on the show about a guy almost taking off the left side of my car in a left turn lane. Had the same thing almost happen again today. And I had a problem with a semi that decided to get into the left turn lane too early. And because of that, I ended up having to drive 3 miles down the road to be able to do a U-turn to come back to where I needed to turn left, because, the semi created an issue. How about enforce the laws on the books before we start adding more laws to the books that aren't going to get enforced other than beep, 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 beep,
Well, and
beep,
more
beep,
laws and
beep,
more
beep,
laws and
beep,
yeah,
beep,
exactly.
beep, beep.
More laws and more technology that we don't need. However, I will say that you know what, John, I'll be one of the drivers that in that survey that says, "Yeah, I want this in my car." And in other news, I'm now searching even harder for my 1993 Beretta GT, and I will be using that as my daily driver.
Well, and the final bit of news that I have, which oddly ties back to this ISA system, Ferrari announced a few days ago they're pulling GPS out of all of their cars. Which
The one time I will say, "Good job, Ferrari. Proud of you."
so that means how do they comply with this ISA system that took effect in Europe? Which, if for those of you that don't know, Italy is part of the EU and is in Europe. So I don't know how Ferrari is going to comply. They do say because of the popularity and basically the demand for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, that's why they're eliminating it, because people use their phones for navigation, because then it's the same technology, vehicle to vehicle to vehicle. You don't have to learn a different navigation system in each vehicle as you change cars. And Ferrari owners quite often own other makes and models of cars. Yes, they could have the Persang for their SUV or something, but they quite often will have a Porsche in the stable or a Mercedes. And this way, everything can be flow across the board, unless, of course, they're driving a General Motors electric vehicle, which no longer supports Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. So it makes me wonder, how's Ferrari going to get around this? But it also screams Ferrari is abandoned autonomous driving, because you cannot create an autonomous driving vehicle using and dependent on Apple Maps or Waze or Google, because that's putting a whole bunch of liability on yourself relying on a third party to do that. That actually has to be a core function of the car, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but so I guess this is Ferrari maybe saying, we're for the drivers here. This is what we're going to do. Now all they got to do is say, we're going to keep producing gasoline motors and to hell with this hybrid stuff. But then again, the newest Ferraris with their hybrid systems are kind of fast.
Well, I mean, they are, John. I think we've mentioned on the show before that, a push straight to all electric vehicles isn't the right way to go right now. Hybrids are the way to go. And in sports cars, and again, it's cool to hear that Ferrari is taking this approach because, as you say, it may be them starting down the path of Ferrari is a car for driving, and it is going back to the core of being a sports car, and you know they are manufacturing vehicles for the astute driver. And if that's the case, more power to them, because that's awesome. I don't think they need to abandon the, idea of hybrids and go only back to internal combustion engines, because, if we look at it, I mean, even with the Corvette and the E-Ray they have out now, which is a hybrid system that assists the car to make it faster and quicker and all those things. You can do amazing things with hybrid technology where you're combining the internal combustion engine with electric motors. I mean, McLaren proved that how many years ago? And so I think it's awesome. And maybe, if Ferrari pushes hard enough, we had Brexit, the British exit from the EU. Maybe, they can convince Italy that we need something like a ex Italy. ex-Italy, I think we would call it, where they exit the EU and they don't have to follow all these crazy European Union, you know, guidelines of having, your car tracked and tell you when it's speeding. A giant Italian middle finger to the EU's rules on automobiles. Which, reminder, John and I both have Italian in our heritage. So, yeah.
I was at the Italian festival last weekend.
Any Ferraris?
Yes.
Good.
Mob Inc. that I do the podcast for, Automobiles Alabama, had a nice display of Ferraris, Fiats, classic Fiats. There were no newer Fiats, Lamborghinis, Maseratis. It was a nice little setup they had there. And what was funny is my girlfriend, as we're going by, she goes, "I really like that one." I said, "Great, that's the one we can afford." It was a Fiat 124 Spider, the old style,
yeah, those
not
are
the Miata.
those are good looking.
They're getting
not the Miata kind
not
of.
Not the Miata based one. No, the old, nice traditional one.
Those are.
I've
cool.
always been.
There was actually one at Motor Buster.
I've always been an X19 kind of guy. I remember going to buy the car dealership when I was alive, or I was driving when they were actually still selling those. And I was alive when they were. Yeah. I had somebody comment on my watch today, and I said, "Oh yeah, it's just a reproduction of the watch I used to wear in 4th grade." And then I said, "Oh, remember, I was in 4th grade in like 82, 83. I don't think this girl was born before 2004, So and I had to explain to her what a Casio data bank was and how it was an advanced calculator watch that was alphanumeric. Oh, so
that sounds like a riveting conversation.
Well, it is. That's why I bought the watch. Actually, the watch was a gift for my girlfriend's mother for Christmas. One of the many watches I got for Christmas. Oh, so let's jump into, now that we've pushed you to halfway through the show.
Half the show on news, but that's okay.
Yeah. And we'll get to the questions. Actually, Jason, if you're going to half our cars are hybrids, gas, oil, they're actually all gas electric. There's very few cars out there that don't have a battery in there.
That's true. And an alternator to create electricity. And the next segment of the show brought to you by the letters Q and A.
Yes. What are the psychological effects of car ownership?
Such an existential question, John.
I had a couple here that were way out there. I don't know what these.
What are our listeners drinking or smoking?
Well,
what was the question again?
What are the psychological effects of car ownership?
Okay, I will answer that. Well, I'll answer it with more questions because first, what era car are we talking about when we talk about car ownership? Because if it's brass era or horseless carriage, the psychological effects are, let's see, what are the best terms to use? Madness.
Cause you to wear glasses and hats all the time.
No, he said psychological, didn't he? So
yes.
I mean, we're not talking physical, we're talking psychological. So madness, possible multiple personality disorder, and let's see, what else does it cause? Anger issues, but madness falls into that, and probably insanity in the end.
Now, see, I looked at it as we're talking collector cars and the car hobby as an enjoyment. And I took it as psychological. It gives you, kind of it used to be, when you turn 16, you looked forward to that because you got that sense of freedom and control. It was your first big step into adulthood because you could go somewhere without your parents or depending on your parents. You were in control. It gave you the car you had in high school was a status symbol. And for people like me that are shallow, the better your car, the better the person you were, and the better girl you could get on a date, or the more popular you were. So I think I want to say it's positive. Yeah, there's some of that narcissistic tendencies in there. But on the flip side, as you get older and you become crotchety like I have become, you start getting the stresses and anxieties of driving, buying the cars, insuring the cars, the other drivers. I mean, this is a perfect example. Car ownership is absolutely fun until there's a second car owner around you. If you were the only car on the road, there's no worries other than filling it up with gas or charging it up at the power plant. But that's how I look at it. Is I think I look at cars a lot like cigars. They're there to provide a release and escape. I love driving. I love driving by myself. It's just peaceful. Get lost in thought. So that's what I think the psychological effects of an automobile are.
Yeah, and I mean, I was being a bit sarcastic when talking about
yes.
the Brad
Yes, you
Garrett
definitely.
horseless carriage. I mean, it does drive you mad. I mean, it's nuts that those of us that play with the early cars do what we do. But I will say, and there are multiple people out there who can verify this. When I get in an early car, a teens era, even earlier car, and go for a drive, there is probably no time in my life that I have a bigger smile on my face and have very little stress, that I'm carrying with me when I'm driving one of those cars down the road. I let go of everything and I enjoy the moment and the experience of driving one of those cars. And that's true, I think, throughout all the cars I have owned or driven in my life. And if you are someone with that deep love of the automobile and the experience of driving, getting into any vehicle and driving it, okay, maybe other than your modern commute car, but if you have a commuter car that you love, you may experience it there too. But getting in any classic car or antique car and driving it, to me, it's an experience that takes you away from the worries of life and the world in my approach to it. I mean, even my 1974 GTO back when we had that, it was a fairly modern vehicle by standards of the other vehicles that my dad and I collect. And I still had a great time driving that car and experiencing it. And so, yeah, I agree with you, John. I think, truthfully, the psychological effects for most of us and the reason we're in this hobby is it is an escape from the real world, from the challenges of life, the stresses of life that we have. And when we can go out to the shop or and work on one or go out for a drive in one of our cars, we're getting away from all of that and we're getting into our happy place, let's call it, and something that we enjoy and brings us pleasure. So to be serious, yes, it is psychologically good for your soul.
Which just about the way you ended that would lead into the next question. Not quite as deep in thought, but what are the qualities you look for in your collector car? What makes it enjoyable?
Well, for me, and this, especially where I am in life right now, and as I've grown in the collector car hobby, for me, it's become about kind of unique and interesting vehicles that have some kind of interesting technology or interesting engineering behind them. I mean, the reason I wanted the 490 over a Model T, the Chevrolet over the Ford, is due to the overhead valve system, because it was a little bit better system than the in the standard poppet valves that the Model T has in the block. Gave a little more power. And I mean, even to a point where there were adapters being made in period to put the overhead Chevy valves onto Model T blocks. They're very cool systems that you could do a conversion of. So, having an overhead valve car from 1916 and 1919, I find interesting. And, the reason I picked up the Duryea buggy yacht, there was a lot about my childhood growing up, near Saginaw where there was a plant for those. But beyond that, it's billed when it was sold originally as a two-cylinder, two-stroke engine, but it's truthfully two single-cylinder engines running on a common crank. So it's odd, right? And it's something that people don't see. So, those are kind of the things I look for. And even, I mean, even if we stretch back and maybe it's been strokes of luck when I've bought some of the cars, and but the 74 GTO, although it's a standard Pontiac 350, four-speed manual transmission, but that was not a highly, produced car. It was low production numbers, and so it was kind of a rare car you didn't see a lot. So we liked the fact of that as well. So for me, I got thinking. Actually, I was thinking about this a couple hours ago, John, before we started the show, not knowing this question would come up. Um, I keep going back to that. Rare cars aren't always valuable. So for some reason, this was in my head tonight. I was out in the shop doing something, and I got thinking about it. It's like, yeah, people say, oh, Derek has, I've got a few rare cars in my collection, and in people's minds, that means, oh, valuable cars. So I've decided that I'm no longer going to say my cars are rare because people think that means valuable. I am just going to call them obscure, because I don't think when you say, "Oh, I have an obscure car," people go, "Oh, it must be valuable." So I like obscurity in my vehicles.
I don't know if I'm going to define obscure as always being less expensive, but I think it's a good way of explaining both of our car takes. I mean, I'm very kind of eclectic with the vehicles that I like. Um, and what I look for is what, usually fun. There's either the car oozes fun or the car oozes practicality. I love my CRXs, which I compare the Mini I have to, is about as close as you can get to a late model CRX. And small, lightweight, fun to toss around. The NA and B Miatas fall into that. I just like small. I was driving a Camry the other day, and I just don't like it. It's just a big car. But there's times. I mean, on the flip side, I like driving a Lexus LS 400 or 430, which is probably still smaller than a late model Camry. But they do exactly what you want them to do. They're quiet, ride smooth, um, comfortable, and when I'm in that, that's kind of what I want. I guess what I find I guess the simplest way is what makes a car pleasurable to me is it fits the need I have at that exact moment in time. And over the years, I've said before, I've had multiple cars in my collection and they do exactly what I want them to do. I mean, had a Jeep. That way, if you wanted to go off-roading or convertibling and that, you could do it. And I had a Lotus and, be able to have your sports car and, have something rare and different or obscure, as Derek called it. And then I had a pickup truck in case I needed to do some work or haul something, and had four-wheel drive. So in case it snowed. And then I had a Civic two-door because that was very practical to get back and forth to work. It doesn't have to feed my ego. It just has to do what I want it to do. And right now, I would love to have a small van or truck to add to the driveway. The Mini and the Ford that I have are perfect. When I go to the store, when I go to work, I take the Ford because that is a practical thing. And it makes me happy because I have this practical vehicle that I can do this with, and I don't have to worry too much about it. Don't worry about door dings. Don't worry about scratching it. But when I'm going to go out on a nice date or over to a friend's house or out to the lake where I'm thinking of relaxing and having fun, that's where the Mini screams to me. So what makes a perfect car to me and what makes an enjoyable car to me is it fits the need I have at that moment in time. Unfortunately, that takes a lot of money sometimes. I mean, just even having two cars is a very expensive proposition. And I'm fortunate that I don't want to say I have enough money to have two cars because technically I don't, but I'm willing to sacrifice other things to be able to have that pleasure because cars are so important to me. Does that make sense? Or would I
think it
totally
makes
lose
perfect sense,
everybody?
John. And that's, I mean, it's, going on that vein of what you're talking about, it is a choice that many of us make to, you know, give up other things in life to have automobiles, and because we love them so much. And as friends, growing up in the hobby and being around a lot of people that have, great collections and good collections, one of the jokes that we always say is, car people are money poor and car rich. That's how we live our lives. We're money poor. We don't have a lot of money laying around, but we got cars, man. We've got them stacked up in the car bank, which is the barn and the shop, and we're car rich sometimes. So yeah, I go right along with that, John. 100% agree. But before you jump into the next question, I want to just say, if you're out there listening tonight, guys, you got a question, jump in the comments, shoot us a question. We've got some, questions that were pre-sent in to John, and but we're here to have live questions as well. So if you got some, shoot them in.
Well, I'm going to jump to one because he's in the chat room and he kind of threw out his question. He threw it out in our conversation earlier this week. And he said that he's done with newer cars. I don't know if the one car he was looking at, the old man upset him and I'm not going to buy anything like that retractable hardtop thing he was looking at. But I think that thought process isn't bad. And I mean, what is, he says newer cars. I mean, the average car on the road today is 12 to 14 years old, which doesn't mean the cars on the road are 14 years old. That means they're anywhere from brand new to 28 years old for the majority of the people, because that's the average. And remember, the average is in the middle. Some are newer, some are older. And there's a reason people are like that, because they can work on the cars themselves. They can play with the cars themselves. And do you think there's anything wrong? I mean, we kind of had an episode a couple of weeks ago. Can you drive a classic? But I don't think we're really talking classics. We're going to say we go back 25 years here. Something built 2000 to present. Well, they still have some computers in that. They don't have all that stuff that really started to show up in the teens, in 12, 13, 14, when we started to really add the computers and the touch screens and the navs and backup cameras and, all this technology to cars. Do you see any problem with even thinking that way, is to think you can simplify your car life by buying an older car, or is that a wrong thought? Are you better buying something new, because new will probably be less frequent in repairs and such?
Well, I think it depends on who you are, John. If you're somebody obviously that's probably listening to this show, you probably are a car person and probably have some mechanical knowledge behind you. If you're going to buy a used car, you have to expect that you are going to have to do work on it. You're going to have to. There's things wear out, parts wear out, components wear out, and if you talk about 2000 to present, and or even let's say 2000 to 2010, before a lot of the computer upgrades and updates and additions were brought into the automobile, you know, things are wearing out. Things are starting to have issues, and you're either going to have to do the work yourself. John just did it on his daily, wheel bearings, things like that. But you're also going to have to know some of the computer work, how to replace some of the sensors that are in the cars that work with the computers and the ECUs and all of those wonderful electronics we have. So, you know, either you have to understand that you're going to have to do some work yourself, or you're going to have to pay the bills at the shop to have the car worked on. But then it's just kind of in my opinion, it'd be a cost analysis, right? I mean, go out and buy a new car today. I don't, and that's a question I had for tonight, John, and maybe this is the right time to bring it up. But obviously everybody knows business is supply and demand in this world, right? So I think one of the big questions here becomes as well, when at some point we're going to reach a a pretty high point of saturation of the automobile in supply in the US and around the world globally, honestly. And how is that going to impact prices? Because honestly, right now in the economy, that at least here in the US, I don't hear a lot of people or see a lot of people sitting around saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go look at new cars this weekend. I'm going to go buy a new car," because I don't know many people that can afford the price of a new car anymore. So, I mean, the cost analysis would be, do you want another mortgage payment every month, practically, with the way new cars, how much new cars are costing? Or do you go buy a good used car somewhere, and every now and then you've got a fairly large bill to pay to get it repaired? But, if it's one or two 1,500 to $2,500 bills a year versus a 7 to 800 plus payment a month for a new car, the cost analysis, you're probably better off getting the used car.
Well,
I hope that all made sense, but I mean, it's just the prices of new cars are terrible, and I think that's why we're seeing so many used cars still on the road.
let me see something. I had pulled up, because of some research I was doing the other day, Dodge Ram Classic Tradesman, $38,705.
Yeah.
And
How much?
well, I guess it's a Ram, $38,705.
So
which
even
comes out
that's pricey.
which comes out to a $567 a month car payment for 72 months. And my statement as with cars has always been when the repairs exceed the payment. If you can have a new car, if you can be making a car payment with what the repairs are. So if that used car is running you $6,000 to $7,000 a year in maintenance, then you might want to start looking for something new. But if you're happy with what you have and say it's completely paid off, and if that used car that's running you $6,000 a year in repairs has a car payment on it, the math even works out different. But I guess if the combined book cost of that used car doesn't buy you a new car, then you're fine where you're at. If you're happy with the car, if it's not in the shop every week, if it's not leaving you stranded. But you're right, Derek. And there is going to be a point here that people are just going to, and we might be right at the cusp of it. New cars are too damn expensive. But I was talking to a realtor the other day, and their statement was, we were talking about buying houses and, how are people affording them? And they're going, a lot of these houses are being sold for cash offers. And even the realtors are going, where the hell do people have $300,000 and $400,000 in the bank to buy a basic house and, make an all cash offer bid? Where's all this money coming from? And I guess if we live in this world, a $60,000 car isn't that big of a deal. Or do these people have $400,000 to buy a house cash because they're driving something that's 15 years old and they haven't made a car payment in 10 years? It's there at some point, the market's going to have to check. And I think I believe the check was going to be the car manufacturers forcing us into leases. But even leases don't work anymore because the value a car holds, your lease payment's damn near your car payment. And, you either can own it in 7 years or you can make an infinite car payment. And I guess for a long time, I read an article and I go, yeah, that's kind of it. I've resigned to make a car payment for the rest of my life. My girlfriend, no, she's paying off her car as fast as she can and will have it paid off and she will drive it into the ground. Different thinkings. I'll be honest, she's a lot better with money than me. But I'm at a loss on, kind of that new thing is you've got to figure out how much money you have and what you can afford and the time you have and the inconvenience you want to put up with. And for me, for years, it's always been, I don't want to be inconvenienced. So I'm going to pay more to always drive a newer car that's always under warranty. When it came to buying a car for work, because of the amount that I drive for work, and I've had, the Ford for about just shy of 18 months now, right at 18 months. And I've put almost 60,000 miles or so on the car. I knew a price point that I wanted to be at. I hit the price point. I knew what I was going to have to sacrifice. I said to myself, I'm going to buy it and buy an extended warranty with it. And I decided to sell the warranty back because I was putting on miles too fast. What's the big deal? I'm not going to spend an extra $2,000 or $3,000 to have this warranty that I'm going to wear out in 5 months. And when it really came down to it, when I needed the warranty here, I ended up doing the work myself for $300 because I could. I had a place to do it. But, if you live in an apartment, if you, community housing, whatever you want to call it, if you don't have a driveway and a garage or a buddy with a driveway and a garage, it's hard to do that maintenance. So I don't know. Affording a new car, I'm forgetting what the original question was, but affording a new car, it's just, to me, it's hopeless. And what's the difference if I, have a $60,000 Toyota or a $45,000 Toyota, or I can finance a Porsche for 9 or 10 years and have the same payment, and probably have a car that's going to last it. Just, I don't know. It's a really tough question to answer.
It is. And Jason, one of our avid listeners, brought up great points in the comments while we were talking, John. The price of parts now for the more modern vehicles is absolutely insane in some cases. I mean, he pointed out in his comment that the XLR taillight is $2,000. The C7 torque tubes, which I've talked to many people about, that's a $4,000 part. And as he says, I don't remember parts on cars from the 80s and 90s costing that much to buy. And, I mean, obviously newer technologies, things like that, it's going to make things cost. But I mean, when a taillight assembly costs $2,000, I mean, it feels very much like the auto industry is out of touch with the buying public, right? They're actual consumers in some cases. And honestly though, looking back on his pardon me, looking back on automotive history throughout time, there have been a number of times and decades where we've gone through this auto industry being out of touch with what the American public is looking for. And let's just say the late 70s and 80s, when we, had suffered through the OPEC oil crisis and everything, and they decided to build giant land yachts with big engines in them, and the Japanese cars were starting to come over that were small and fuel efficient. They learned a hard lesson. So who knows what is in the future? Jason said there's always the AutoZone parking lot for repairs, changing transmission and oil. And let me tell you what, I've done a few of those, especially with antique cars, and it works great. I mean, I've changed alternators on Miatas in AutoZone parking lots. I've changed oil in antique cars in AutoZone parking lots. It's a great place. Everybody's friendly there.
I can't say I've ever done anything like that, but it is. I guess parts cost, that is one of the things that I've bitched about with these recent fork repairs, is how expensive it was to have a professional do the repair. I was kind of good with, the part prices for my 15 Ford Fiesta, which is not a C7 Corvette. It's a car that's kind of built for the masses, and they built tons and tons of them. When you're dealing with an XLR, that car was built, what was it, $60,000, $70,000 brand new at a time when $60,000, $70,000 was pushing a lot of money for a car. So a $2,000 taillight doesn't matter, because the consumer that car is designed to go to is somebody who's going to lease it for 3 years, or somebody who's going to buy it and flip it and, sell it in 3 years, not necessarily flip it. They're not going to be in the car long enough for that taillight to go out and need replaced. If it gets into an accident, well, the insurance will get it. And then we can get into the ridiculous insurance rates we pay because these parts for the cars are so expensive. I remember, I can't remember which car I was buying, but I was buying it brand new, and it might have been my Fusion. And they asked, does it have the HIDs or does it have standard headlamps? And we went and looked. It's just standard headlamps. I was buying a pretty base car at the time. And he goes, oh, good, because the extended warranty was like $4,200 if I had HIDs. But if I had the standard headlamps, I think that warranty cost me $900. just because of how much more expensive the HIDs were, and the warranty, the Ford, this is buying a Ford extended warranty on a Ford through the dealership. They knew that those headlamps were not going to last, or they would need replaced within the warranty period that I was looking to buy. And it all trickles down, and it's just, you're right. The manufacturers seem to be out of touch with, the real world. But let's go back and look. The designers, the engineers, and the executives, they're all in their, six-figure club, and money's not quite as important. But when you're playing in that, 50,000 or less club, which the majority, unfortunately, of the world is in. I mean, we've got the 1%ers or 2%ers or 5%ers, whatever. But face it, the majority of this country makes 50 grand a year or less. And when you've got to give up, 2 weeks pay for a taillight, or a month and a half's pay for a torque tube on a Corvette that you could have bought for, what's a C7 now, 25 grand. I mean, when these parts are 20% of the price of the car, there's probably something wrong with the equation. And then when you start looking at older cars, start looking at C6 Corvettes, they're cheaper because parts aren't there for them. I don't know. I don't. Well, we went down that road, and we're going to conclude here real shortly, because I don't want to get too much farther down this road of how damn expensive cars are. Maybe we have to put a show together and really dive into that and have some examples and ownership costs and things. But I don't know.
Do you have one bonus question left that's a simple one to answer that we can wrap up on?
Ooh, I got to go back to my question list. I don't know what, when I was going through here, I was looking at really in depth. Cool. Oh, I'm going to just say, buying a new car for your life, EV or gas?
I'm going to stick with internal combustion.
And see, I guess EV, gas, or hybrid, because if I didn't have,
if you add hybrid, I would go hybrid.
Yeah, because if I didn't have the job I did that requires driving in the middle of nowhere, half the time, and I've watched, there's not a lot of charging stations on a lot of my routes. If I was working local and I was working downtown Birmingham, I would really consider electric and definitely hybrid for my next vehicle.
And same here, John. The reason I would go hybrid is the length of my commute. That's if I was working, again, within a 15 to 25 minute range of my house, I'd go electric. But driving, nearly just short of an hour on my commute, 40, typically 50 minutes on average. I wouldn't be able to go electric. I could, but I would be uncomfortable probably, especially if there was heavy traffic, and I got in rush hour traffic and was sitting for a long time and creeping, and that whole thing that happens in Nashville or any major city. But for my life right now, my next one might be a hybrid.
Yeah, see, that distance, it would depend. And then again, it comes down to cost. If I had a 300-mile range hybrid, or electric, I would probably, with even your commute and how you go, I probably could still even consider electric. But because I do multiple days, and it's not uncommon for me to do 400 or 500 or 600 miles over 2 or 3 days. And like I said, the inability to charge at a lot of the places I am, I would have to, it would have to be hybrid or internal combustion. But if I was commuting to a set place every day, yeah, I would probably, I would really lean to electric, but hybrid. I still think hybrid's the best of both worlds. I mean, years ago, I almost bought a Chevy Volt, and I really wish I would have. I mean, I think that was the perfect car. And as I've kind of played around with buying new trucks, I'm not going to pay for them, but because of the cost, now that we're, the new Dodge Ram there's electric with technically a gasoline generator on board. That's to me the ideal situation, especially in a truck. But we'll see where we go. But yeah, simply put, I think both of us are solid hybrid candidates if I didn't have the drives that I do and the routes that I do, since I'm technically a traveling auditor and I go store to store over a 3-state area. So, but with that,
Agreed.
I'm going to throw out here for those of you that have actually made it this long. I'm sorry. Maybe I should have said this at the beginning of the show. Next week, we're going to our topic is going to be car movies. And movies where the car is the star. When you think of that movie, you think of the car, not necessarily the actor. And as the examples I kind of gave to Derek beforehand were, when you think of Vanishing Point, you think of the Challenger. When you think of Bullet,
don't
you
give
think
too many away.
Yeah. If you think of Bullet, you think Steve McQueen and the Mustang. But those are what really stick out, where the car makes the movie. And I'm even going to say, like, throw out, now we'll have ours. You come up with yours, shoot them to us. You can email producer at nodrivinggloves.com, send that in, or catch us on the socials, even put it into the comments on this show. We'll go back and check them. No, Jason said something about getting his license plates. Planes are probably cheaper. Well, it all depends what state you live in. Ad valorem taxes in some of these states are, but
yeah. Well, my comment to Jason's pilot's license thing is, it says planes are probably cheaper. The problem with a plane is you have to have a runway to land on, unless you have a Harrier jet or one of those vertical takeoff jets. So my thought has been, getting a properly licensed for a helicopter, because you can just put one of those down anywhere, parking lot. You got good clearance, you can put it down. So a little trickier to fly, from my understanding. So
helicopter, the machine that all it wants to do is tear itself to pieces. But with that, right. Derek, do you have anything you want to say to anybody?
With that, as always, guys, thanks for listening. And if you're enjoying the show, if you enjoy being part of the No Driving Gloves community, obviously, if you're not already following us over on socials, Facebook, Instagram, all those great places, go over, give us a like, give us a follow, do all that wonderful stuff. The QR code at the bottom of the screen here, buy us a coffee if you want to give us a little support. And as we said at the beginning of the show, and we're going to wrap it up on the end of the show this week as well, if you want to help us out, if you want to see No Driving Gloves and the No Driving Gloves community grow, there's only one thing you can do to do that. Share the show.
And with that, it's time to get off your ass and go burn some gas, because we are